Welcome to Biocomputation with Max. I feel I have to come back to the topic of Iran conflict again. After giving himself 2 weeks, Trump decided a couple of days ago to strike Iran's 3 major nuclear reactors over the weekend. Before diving into criticism of this action, let me mention some upsides. President Trump actually supported credibility of US power in the region, which is important for support of Israel and for Arab states like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and even Iraq. They supported US military action, allowing their airspace to be used to help launch or defend from attacks relative to Iran. Now, Israel would be in trouble without the support of these states, and they would all face retaliation without American backup. This would cost a lot of credibility to US in terms of its military might and therefore diplomatically. Of course, there's a huge downside. This is the forever war that Trump campaigned against when he ran for office the second time. Did we exhaust all the options short of the military ones? Is it crazy to establish mutual acceptance or provide sanctions relief to Iran in return for formal relations? Nations of Iran and Israel are far geographically, and there are no problems between them aside from ideology. There was no serious discussion of that with Iran. Now, of course, they were belligerent. They were enriching uranium beyond any reasonable civil needs to 60%. But there wasn't an attempt to establish a detente. Saudi Arabia established some relations with Iran with the help of China. Could this also have been done with Iran and Israel? It's not clear if we tried. What is clear is that both US and Israel would prefer regime change in Tehran. Let us discuss how we got here. On June 12th, President Trump tweeted that we remain committed to diplomatic process. Several days later, he wrote that we control skies over Iran. And then again, he wrote that we could take out Iran's supreme leader. That's quite a bit of revelation about our involvement before this current strike. Now, several days ago, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that Trump would decide whether or not to go in a couple of weeks.
I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks. That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today.
Not going for 2 weeks? That sounds serious. Of course, we know what she meant. She meant US attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. To be honest, this phrasing invokes mental pictures of constipation. Under the Constitution, war powers are vested in Congress, so discussing what exactly she means by to go is difficult. This is not some fantasy book with unspeakable names. This is a democracy, and in the very first interview after the US strike on Iran, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio was asked, are we at war with Iran? Because people don't know. He said no, but struggled to define exactly what this is. I could almost see him calling it a special military operation, but that name was taken. It's like a good web domain name that's really hard to get around. I'm sure they'll think of something. Maybe Persian Freedom Fight Club. Fight, fight, fight.
Anyway, you need people of intelligence on this sort of mission, quest. Thank you.
To look through the video of President Trump delivering his address, flanked by the key personnel of his administration at 4 times speed without sound, so you could see the facial expressions of people flanking him. Now, Trump is clearly quite proud. He is especially at acceleration. You can see him twisting his torso, smiling, and is projecting confidence and even pride. Pete Hegseth's demeanor seems to merely say Haktua, although there is concern and recognition of seriousness on his face. Marco Rubio looks down to the side, blinks profusely. He looks ashamed. Vice President J.D. Vance is looking at Trump with what I can only describe as a mix of concern and horror. On a human level, it looks like the kind of glance one may throw at a daughter whose pet hamster just died, saying, "Are you okay?" But clearly, the more serious note dominates, and that looks to be horror of recognition of international and political implications. Did we bite more than we can chew? And what are the implications for his political future? MAGA was promised no new wars. Now, remarkably, shortly thereafter, Trump tweeted in all caps that now is the time for peace. Of course, he also tweeted clarification for what he means to that, also in all caps, unconditional surrender. Now, the plan seems to have been to provide some misdirection, and they were even proud of that, but also to strike early enough in the weekend that the markets could process the blow by Monday. And indeed, they seem undisturbed. NASDAQ and Dow Jones are up slightly now on Monday. Now, damage to the Iranian sites does not look particularly impressive given the scale of these sites. The GBU-57 bombs are impressive. 20 feet long, 30,000 pounds of explosive, the largest massive ordnance penetrator that there is. Now, looking at strike sites like Natanz, we can appreciate the scale of the site compared to the craters that need to be pointed out because we would struggle to identify them. At Fordo facility, which is buried under the mountains, even more additional magnification is required to show missile impact sites. The entrances are buried and we can see debris scattered around, but the giant white auxiliary building is untouched. So again, this is illustrating how it would take a lot of ordnance to level this massive complex above the ground, let alone when so much of it is below the ground. Now, looking at the Fordo facilities also, we can see that same disparity. Perhaps this is an extremely targeted strike that severed the aorta, but certainly we cannot say from telemetry alone. These strikes are certainly going to cause a significant disruption in production and may even result in loss of some material, although Iranians say they have evacuated masses of material. In fact, there are images of lines of trucks near Fordo days before the attack. It's unlikely that much more than uranium itself was removed. The equipment is too bulky, especially the centrifuges. So this can, in fact, disrupt and temporarily destroy production, but it certainly increases the motivation. So this damage is not lethal, and Iran is choosing to apparently not attack U.S. militarily, but they did vote in the parliament to close the Straits of Hormuz. This is, of course, an economical problem for themselves, cutting their own nose, so to speak, to spite their face. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in his first interview that I mentioned with Fox's Maria Bartiromo, was talking about very eloquently about the attack on these sites and Iranian brinkmanship and why many neighboring Arab states support this. He also reminded Iran how counterproductive it would be to close the Straits of Hormuz, specifically how the oil would impact China. this is a point I made in my recent video.
Do you expect Iran to move to close the Strait of Hormuz to try to disrupt oil transportation across the world?
Well, I encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that, because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil.
In fact, in the analogy of the grand chessboard, both Iranian moves towards striking US directly and blocking off oil were blocked. Now, of course, a military attack could allow US to push for regime change that they want, while disruption of oil hurts China and Iran most of all. On the issue of war, Marco Rubio did say something that made Maria's jaw drop. You see, they want Iran to negotiate, and yet they think that there is an opportunity that is opened by that, by the strike. Countries don't capitulate like that, and he opined that we're actually more stable after the strike.
President Trump acted last night, and I think the world today is safer and more stable than it was 24 hours ago. And a bunch of these countries putting out statements condemning us privately, they all agree with us that this needed to be done.
All Iran has to do is continue to resist and to survive. Did we not learn this from Israelis battling Hamas for 20 months? They can remain intransigent, draining all our resources, as well as Iran's. Now, Trump is showing his frustration with some people from the MAGA camp who are pushing back, such as Tucker Carlson. Now, I believe Trump also did not want this conflict. He is trying to take what perhaps he sees as a necessary long-term responsibility by attacking Iran. However, in the short term, this is likely to jeopardize his MAGA project through involving us in this open-ended conflict. In absence of a quick negotiated settlement, which Iran seems to be rejecting, all the additional blood spilled is only going to increase intransigence on both sides. The impact, as I mentioned before, on the presidency is likely to be severe. We can compare to President Johnson's Vietnam War disrupting great society aspirations. Now, Iran has nearly 2.5 times the population of Vietnam during the war and about 5 times the surface area. Also with very broken, rough terrain, many mountains. Now, Trump has been pushing back on any criticism, including Representative Massey, saying that he doesn't really represent MAGA and Trump wants to primary him. He similarly tweeted calling Tucker Carlson, calling him kooky for making all these questions about the foreign project, which no matter however worthy, is likely to undermine Trump's domestic agenda.
Our list of allies grows thin.
So these are Trump's own people, and this negative and emotional response may be sowing seeds of discord and opposition on the right. It all depends on success, but again, all that needs to happen for Iran to disrupt these plans is for them to dig in and to decline to capitulate either diplomatically or militarily. Now, it would be great if this negotiating tactic did work, but like these people I mentioned, Representative Massey and Tucker Carlson, many others, I'm concerned that this is the opposite of farewell to arms, but a return to arms that will imperil Trump. And I hope he has the wisdom to listen to these voices and to pivot if the magic does not materialize in the short term.